Well, hello everybody. It's not quite 6 o'clock, a couple more minutes, but I wanted to make sure that the connection was as it should be. We'll get started in earnest in a couple more minutes here. I guess I can wave to people as you get on. This is a new format for me. I've done a gazillion of these things on Zoom, Microsoft, all those kind of platforms. So this is my first introduction to Instagram. So I wanted to get up and running to make sure that I had my connection. So we'll see how things go here. I had thought I'd tell some jokes, but I never can remember any good ones. Here's a riddle for you. What do you get when you cross an elephant with a fish? You get swimming trunks. Okay, I may be a second or two off, but according to my clock, it is time to start. And in my career in teaching, I always like to start on time rather than deciding to wait for people that were not prompt, just mainly because those of you that have already signed in should not have to wait for anybody who hasn't signed in. So this will be recorded, it'll be posted. And so for those who are going to be joining maybe a little bit later on, they can catch up by looking at the recording. My name is Franz Spohn, and rather than trying to go back and forth and try to figure out how to mount the camera and then unmount it and all that kind of stuff, I have it fixed to what I hope is the optimum position so that you can see what I'm going to be doing. If you're interested in seeing my work, what kind of things I've done, my Instagram account is my name, my last name, then my first name, Spohn Franz. I've done everything from illustrate children's museum, children's books to working in museums. I taught in a maximum security prison. I've taught in a variety of colleges and other institutions, have my own PBS series for kids on instructional art for them. So I've done quite a bit of things. I've had great adventures as an artist, and so I hope that this role that I have here of demonstrating will be of benefit to you. Okay, so I wanted to mention that I'm going to be focusing on Faber-Castell's new Albrecht Durer watercolor markers. And so I was alerted that if after my demo you decide that you want to try them and you'd like to order them from Art Central, that if you mention code Franz between February 20th and the 23rd, they will give you a 30% discount at checkout when you put your order in. Okay, so that's kind of a housekeeping type of things. All right, so I'm going to be using these watercolor markers and a few other water media. And so I'm going to be using Legion Paper's Stonehenge Aqua Cold Press. This is a great paper to use for any kind of water medium. It's a heavy paper. It's 300 grams GSM, which is equivalent to about 140 pound. This is a pad that's 10 by 14. I have another pad that I'll bring in that is a square that's 10 by 10. It's a nice heavy paper, and the other thing that's nice about it is that along the edges it's been glued, or there's an adhesive there, so it's like a regular watercolor block. And I like it because it has a nice texture. It's a cold press, and one thing about paper, it is every bit as important as the materials that you're going to be using on it. So it's good to have a good foundation. This is 100% cotton. It's very absorbent. It's a really quality paper. It's a heavy made paper. And so it's going to show your work off the best than if you use something that isn't quite as good as this. So I recommend for you to pick out a paper that is a good quality. Okay, so I'm going to flip it around this way so the extra is on this set. And these are the materials right here. Let's see if I can kind of position so that it isn't a glare. These are the Faber-Castell watercolor markers. They're Albrecht Durer watercolor markers. Okay, and I'll kind of put them off the sides so they don't reflect so much. They're available in 30 colors. They're dual-ended. Let's open these guys up, and you can see, how nice they are. This is the full set of 30. Okay, and they're dual-ended so that they have a brush tip and they have a bullet. And so that when I'm working with them, you can either go from thin to thick depending on what kind of pressure you have, or if you're doing something that requires more of kind of a linear thing, it has a point like that. They're very juicy and they're very vibrant. And I will grab one of my water brushes. It has some water on it, and then we'll squirt a little out here. And you can see that they are very vibrant. You can keep them very solid. You can let them blend. You can get rid of the entire mark, or you can also get them to bleed a little bit. It's going to be entirely up to you to decide how you want to use them. And I found that these water brushes work very nicely with these. You can also use, your kind of more standard brush. However you decide you're comfortable working with these. So I'm going to set these off for a little bit. And I've already done an example. We have limited time, and so I'll move this over and kind of get it a little more in there. So this is an open tulip up and through here. We've got one that has already kind of fallen apart. I love it at this point when they kind of open up like that and the petals haven't dried up yet, and it's a really vibrant color. And I just think that kind of open up part of the flower and the intensity of it is very attractive. So I thought I would use this as an example. So I worked on this. I finished it. As you can see, what we're going to aim for, this took several days to get done. So obviously we don't have that kind of time. But what I want to do is, now that you've seen this, we can look at it again later. But I've already kind of blocked it out. And I work on, essentially the same image, but then I will show you some of the techniques using the watercolor markers that I used to develop that, and we'll see how far we get with that. And then also I want to show you some other things. Not everybody is necessarily into a super realistic approach to things, and it's my work is a little bit more whimsical and kind of out of my head, but I'm going to try to show a variety of techniques so you can see how versatile these materials are. Now, I've gone ahead and I blocked out my format with some blue painter's tape. As I had mentioned, there's adhesive that kind of keeps the sides flat so that as the water absorbs water, it's not going to, when it dries, it's going to still dry flat. And then it's just a matter of taking a palette knife or something and sliding it between sheets and cutting that adhesive off. But it's a nice thing to have crisp borders, because when you peel that off, then if you mat it, then it's going to look very sharp and kind of highlight the crispness of what you've done. Okay, so what I generally do is I use the brush points more than anything else, and as indicated, this is more of a bright red tulip, and I have a tendency to kind of go from light to dark, and so I'm going to start with my brush pen here, and we'll get maybe to this one here. And I also have found that you want to kind of be very direct with these. So I'm just making some preliminary strokes here. We'll kind of get that first petal in there. And then I'll take my watercolor or my water brush, and as soon as I put some water on that, it's going to start helping me blend that together. And you can kind of see how it flows and how nice and juicy it is. And I'll kind of go up against the edge. The paper is doing a nice job absorbing this. Okay, I'll kind of go into there. Now, when it's wet, I can take a paper towel, I can take a rag or something like that, and if I think that maybe it's a little bit too dark, I can take some of the color right off. That is a little bit, it's the function of it being watercolor, but it's also the function of the paper. This particular paper has a lot of sizing in it. And what the sizing does is prevent the pigment from going directly into the fiber of the paper, and the more, it's like a buffer, it's like a protective seal, and the more there's sizing in the paper, the easier or the longer you have to work with it, so that you can pick it up like that. If I want to, I could actually add some more water to it, and then if I push it with the heel of the brush, I can move the pigment around. But it still has a really nice deep red color to it. Okay, so we've got one of the petals done. So as I come around, that is the darkest petal that I have to work with. And then here, this one is also fairly dark up until about here. And then part of that petal goes off, and that's part of what's going to give this a little bit of a dimension. And so what I could do is take my water brush and I can kind of smooth that out a little bit. And then what I do a lot of times too, I'll move this a little bit so you can kind of see what this is. Scrap paper, so I can kind of play around with this a little bit. I can really dilute that, and if I want to take advantage then of this being a little bit lighter, I've used the same marker, but I've diluted it. So then that's going to kind of give me the feeling that that's part of a petal that is bent over. And this is a little bit lighter up and through here too. So I can work that out. And it's just a little bit lighter kind of in through here, and then it gets dark again. In fact, it gets quite dark in there, so I can go back. Now again, I don't want to be too fussy with this at this point. I want to kind of get most of it in here. I want to keep the color fairly flat. I'm just kind of blocking it in. Now I personally like dealing directly from a still life, but my tulips finally kicked the dust. So I did have a reference photograph that I can use. Okay, so that's starting to look tulipy. Let's go over to this side. And this one is fairly dark in this part of the petal, and then has a little kind of dark streak coming down in through there, and then this just kind of, and that lightens up a little bit in through here, a little bit darker up here, and then there's just a little bit of a lightness that comes in through here, and then it picks up again here and comes like that. Get my pen out, or my watercolor water brush. Okay. All right, let's go to the left. Now, I also like to let it dry before I do too much on it. If it's still wet and I keep on going over it with markers, it kind of muddles the color a little bit, and it kind of destroys the immediacy of it, which is kind of what I think in terms of watercolor. That's kind of, you got to be in there and out. You don't want to fuss over it too much. All right, so this comes around, through here, and then just a little bit darker in here. So again, what I'm doing is kind of laying in the groundwork. And it's darker in through here. That comes on down and kind of meets with this. And I got a couple little okay. Water. Now I'm going to really get a lot of water, get something very pale, because this part in through here is fairly light. And so let that kind of blend together. I got to push that up a little bit. And you can see too that the paper allows water to puddle up. It doesn't absorb that moisture right away, so that gives you a chance to kind of manipulate things a little bit. If it didn't have that sizing in there, that pigment would be immediately sucked up by the paper, and then you wouldn't have much of an opportunity to kind of manipulate things and get things to work around. Okay, so let's, oops. Okay, in here again. So you can see, actually, I mean, how quickly this is starting to work out. These are nice and juicy. I also have a tendency to do the strokes, like this is part of this that is curved, so I'm going to put the strokes that way, and it kind of helps me, in a way, sculpt it, even though it's like on a two-dimensional flat surface. I'm kind of treating it like it's, you know, three-dimensional. So again, I like that real nice juicy water bit that allows me to move things around, and then this will come in through here. And through here. Okay, again, I want to get very pale wash here. And that comes in like that. Okay, get that to move around a little bit. And then this is the palest in through here. It's not quite white, so there we go. Okay, well, we got about half of it down. We're doing okay. All right, so let's move over here again. And I've got a very dark bit here, so I'm really going to make that very dark and really saturate that. And then it kind of comes up into here where it's very dark as well. And it lightens up a bit up and through there. And then it's kind of like this petal and that petal are overlapping. And so this kind of section in through here is going to be very dark as well. And see how easy it is to apply that. And if you're not, this is actually a good transition. If you're more accustomed to drawing, you can kind of draw some of that color in. And then transition with the water brush. Okay, I want to keep that light. Okay, this is light up through here. Very light up here. Okay. All right. Now, let's kind of look up and through here. This is pretty dark in here. I like the way that when you have these leaves, as they start going, as the flower starts to kind of age, mature, I like the way that it kind of, you get these little scooping actions. And okay, and come back, I'm going to start building up a little color, a little texture, and a little extra there. Okay. All right, so let's continue a little bit more here on the flower. All right, the next one in through here, as I mentioned, that's pretty dark in through there. So I'm going to leave just a little bit of a light in between. And this gets dark in through here too, but I want to kind of separate. What's nice about these water brushes as well, it gives you an opportunity to keep a nice flow of liquid, like a traditional brush. Even if you have one that holds a lot of water, you still have to dip it and recharge it. And what's rather nice about the water brush, you just kind of give it a little squeeze. And it's really good for floating these washes. And then when they dry, instead of being absolutely flat, almost like kind of like gouache or something, you get some nice textures. And you get the feeling of kind of the organic sense of it instead of being totally flat. Okay, so again, some lighter colors in through there. There's a lot of highlight on that one with my reference. Okay. So it gets dark in here again. It gets very dark there, up to about like that. Okay, now what I'm going to do, okay, I'm going to get some water to flow through my brush, and then I'm going to pick some of that up. What I'm doing is I'm kind of using the heel of the brush to kind of rub against the paper, and then I can wipe that excess off. And so that way, if it shows up, I don't know if the camera's catching it, but you can kind of see where it's starting to create, you know, starting to kind of create a little bit of a highlight in through there. Okay, so then as we come along here, a bit more. Kind of soften that edge a little bit, go over this. Okay. This is fairly dark in through here, so I'm going to just put in some. And the other thing to, you know, kind of keep in mind too is, like, I'm creating the impression I have of what's happening with this. I'm not particularly going after every tiny little detail, you know. You know, we give the impression of this, but I don't necessarily, you know, have to make it like a photograph, because, you know, if it looks like a photograph, then why am I doing this, right? Okay, so we got one more bit of the petal to go yet, and that's in through here. And this is the darkest part right there, and then it kind of maybe I'll do is, I don't know if you saw that, but let me move it again. I put some down here, and now I'm kind of using that almost like a pan. I want it to be a little bit more so that when I go over it, it's a little bit darker, so it kind of blends a little bit, but then I want the ability for it to be a little bit lighter as it kind of comes in this area here. Okay, so there's the basic flower. At some point I'll come back through when it dries, and I can start building up these edges, a little bit of a contrast in the edge. I'll let it dry, come back, and then put another bit with the brush tip up and through there. It's even though it's not quite dry and quite ready for it, just so you can see what I'm talking about. What I'm going to do here is kind of come in through here, and then it's just a little kind of almost like crepe paper edge in through there. So you can see how then that starts to kind of create the feeling for that edge coming up, and then I can kind of come from here and bring it forward. And so that's going to start giving it a little bit more dimension. Again, I'm not necessarily trying to do it ultra realistic, but I do want to kind of capture the feeling for it. All right, so let's start working in the interior here. And so again, instead of just going across, what I'm doing is I'm thinking it's going from the center, it's going up. So I'm getting my brush to kind of mimic the way that works. And Okay, I'm picking up a little bit of my graphite. I forgot to, usually what I do is once I kind of sketch this out with the graphite, I take a kneaded eraser and I kind of press down into it. And kneaded erasers are somewhat sticky, and so that, like over here, maybe you can kind of see what I'm going to do. Let me bring it over here. Maybe we can kind of get up a little bit more of a close-up so you can kind of see. If I take my kneaded eraser and I press down on top of that, it starts to take all the excess graphite off of there. I still can see it, but I'm removing the part that is still kind of smeary, and I totally forgot to do that. So my yellow is starting to get a little polluted. I don't think it's going to make a huge difference, but I generally remember to do that. So, all right, we'll go back down to a more viable size. Okay, so I'll start doing that. Then I will take a slightly darker color, because in through here, let's see, it's a little bit darker along there, definitely darker in through here. Take my brush. It's pretty bright there, but then it gets darker as it comes along. Okay, so I don't want to damage the surface of the paper by abrading it when it's wet, so I'm going to let that dry before I go back. Down through here, I think it's dry enough I could do this. This is almost entirely this kind of orange color in through here. All right, now the center is really dark, but what I have a tendency to do is to kind of work with grays. Well, actually, before I do that, what I'm going to do is take my yellow. I'm going to clean it because I want to make sure that there isn't any of that graphite. In fact, I'm going to take a paper towel to make sure that it's just totally clean. Okay. And so I'm going to come through and get that yellow. And then this part down and through here is more of kind of like a tan color. It's down below. And then you can just kind of see the stamen here, the way they just have a slight. Okay. So, you know, maybe I can kind of blow it up so you can see a little better. Okay, so I just put that little line in there. Okay, so now I'm going to take my gray, and I'm going to do the similar thing that I was talking about as far as the leaf parts. I come in this direction. So let it radiate from the center. And let it kind of go up a little bit into that yellow area. And around the stem there, that's definitely very dark. So I can outline it and then kind of come from there. All right, now I'm going to go to a slightly darker gray. Because because I like that little tiny bit of white or gray. You know, I'm not overlapping exactly, so I'm getting a little bit of gray to come through. I'm getting darker. I've got a couple little white highlights. Some of it, like in through there, gets very solid. And so it keeps it from being totally flat. Okay. So I only want to spend maybe another 10 minutes on this because I don't want to be remiss in showing you other applications, because not everybody is going to always want to do this. You can do some other things. Okay, so I'll go over another time. And since this is watercolor, they are transparent. So if you go back with the same color on top of what you've already been very quick. Battery is on my phone. I forgot to plug it in, so if you just give me half a chance here, I will get us plugged in, and then okay, there we go. All right, so let's go back out and then kind of see how it's progressing. You can see how I build up to get richer color, and so that's what eventually is going to happen with this. Maybe we have a couple minutes here. I can very quickly do a little bit off to the side so you can see how it is going to kind of all. All right, so there's another leaf here that is kind of in the process of dropping off. So I can block that out. Okay, up and through here, I've got another leaf that's going to come across here. All right, some more. Another petal here. Petal here. Okay. Get a darker green. What's in here? So you see how quickly you can block this out here. And there's a whole bunch of green in through here. It's very dark, so what I'm doing is putting in, I would kind of put in this layer of green first, and then I'll go over it with a dark gray to push it back in the background in the shadows. Okay, I can take my water brush, get that to work over into here so it starts to lighten out. So it comes up in here. A little bit lighter in here, so I can pick some of this up. I can take it, drag it off to the edge on top of the tape. Okay, maybe if I throw in some dark here. Okay, again, this part, I want to kind of curve it the way that it and then it gets a little bit lighter at the top. So instead of it being like a real dark, oops, sorry about that. Well, it actually is a little bit more in highlight. And then around this stamen, it kind of comes out a little bit. Okay, this is a little bit of a yellow in here. This is all yellow in here. Okay, so anyhow, I think that should give you a pretty good idea of how you can get these markers to work. As soon as it's dry, then I can go back again and start building up some darker areas to get some nice saturated color and to start getting a feeling for the edges. Okay. This goes a little bit, gets much darker down here, gets a little bit lighter in there. Keep that nice and dark down and through there. Okay, so anyhow, given a couple more hours, we can get this thing finished, whipped into shape. But what I'd like to do now, let me just move a few of the markers out of the way. And put this over here so it can dry. All right, here's my smaller pad of Stonehenge. And what I thought I would do is that Faber-Castell has what they call index color. And it means that whatever tool you select, if it has the same number, it's the same pigment. So this is a number 118 Scarlet Red Albrecht Durer watercolor marker. This is the number 118 Scarlet Red Pit pen. Now, Pit pen is a brush pen, and the formulation inside is like India ink. They're odorless, but they're very intense, and they are water soluble until they dry, then they're permanent. So it's just like India ink, but instead of always using black pigment, it's the same pigment as in my Albrecht Durer marker. And then I have the same 118 Albrecht Durer watercolor pencil. Okay, so what I thought I would do, okay, this I'm going to draw one of my characters. I like drawing pigs, so okay, so here's a pig with that. Now, I'm going to do a similar one up here, and this is with the Pit pen. Now, the brush size isn't quite as thick, so there'll be a little bit, but you can see that it's very much the same pigment. So this pig will be kind of flying a little bit above the other one. Okay. Now, this one, when it dries, is permanent. This one is still water soluble. So if I want to kind of put in some kind of, shading, some value, I can do that. I'm anticipating where I'm going to put, okay, take my water pen, and so I can kind of get the rest of them colored in here very quickly. But what happens is that as I go over that, I start losing my line. Because the line that I drew with the Albrecht Durer marker is water soluble. Okay, so I have, some nice values here to kind of help flesh them out. But I've lost some of my detail because the lines have also disappeared a little bit. Okay, so 118 Albrecht Durer watercolor marker, and this is the 118 pit pen. The pit pen has dried now. Let's maybe get a little closer up. The pit pen is now dried so that when I do the same type of thing with this one, when I go back and start adding water to kind of get the shading in, it's not going to affect the line. Okay, I'll make sure I've got a clean water brush here. Yeah, so when this comes in through here, even if I go over it, that line still stays. So this is an example of kind of how that concept of indexed coloring kind of helps out. So if you're interested in doing, kind of like caricatures or something a little bit more whimsical, you might want to kind of combine the pit pens with the Albrecht Durer markers. Okay, so as far as what I do, this is kind of more of what I do more than anything else. I just like to start to invent things. So I also have the Albrecht Durer watercolor pencil. So once that dries, I could come back and I could add maybe a little more delicate touch to it. This isn't quite dried yet, but so that way I can get some real light nuances that I might not be able to get with the brush, or it might be a little bit more comfortable trying to do that. Or I could do something like, this is a slightly darker pit pen, and again, this is permanent, so if I want to kind of beef up some of these areas and then go over it again with some watercolor if I want to really. Okay, so I got that. Now, as far as kind of creating things like vegetation, flowers, whatever, take the brush pen and start off with a thin and then go down thick and then a very light stroke. Same thing as I come down here, it's really very juicy, and then as I lift up and go across, and it also, especially on this cold press is a more rough surface. A hot press is much smoother, and in this case I like the cold press because if I have very light pressure, I do very gestural things, then I get a little interruption because of that grain of the paper. All right, so we'll let that dry for a second. We'll make this maybe. So you can use the quality of the brush. So instead of very meticulously drawing something, I can take advantage, if I can get something that looks like that, or I can get something like that. Get something like that. So you can kind of build up a feeling for, like petals. Like that. Let that dry a little bit. This may have set up enough, so if I want to, I can kind of come back in through here and put another part here, and then make that a little bit darker. Bring this down a little bit. Up and through here, it gets a little bit darker. Coming down here, it can be a little bit darker. And you can get some more kind of stems or whatever. So I find that this is a very nice way of getting very quick kind of floral looking things. And it's just a matter of playing with them to see, just in your sketchbook. I mean, I could come back and then get a little more intensity at the bottom, so it kind of looks like the light maybe is coming through at the top, and then the bottom section of this is much more, maybe even coming at it a little something like that. I could add even a darker tone in here. So that's going to give it a little more depth as it comes down in through here. That. And then again, maybe just one like that. So it's really nice to be able to get these kind of strokes with a watercolor brush pen, so it can give you some kind of lively plant life. Come back and maybe put a little bit at the ground here, that to blend a bit. Pen and some of the okay. A little field, and then maybe one last thing. We can talk a little bit about clouds in the sky. Okay, so usually when you have these white puffy clouds, it's much darker at the top, and then it kind of lightens as it comes along. So you can draw your clouds by drawing the sky around them. So if I get a lot of water on that, then I can start to get that to kind of blend, so it starts getting lighter as it comes down. And so as I get that pigment to move around with my water brush, then you can kind of see where I have kind of a nice potential puffy cloud developing. Oops, sorry. Probably wondering what the heck was he talking about. There we go. Didn't realize we were still on the... Here I'm having fun with my happy little clouds, and all you're doing is looking at flying pigs. Okay, so then you can put a little bit of a... Okay, I can get a little base there, add some water to it. I just want a little bit of kind of gray here for the bottom of the cloud. That might be a little bit too subtle. A little darker yet, I think. So my best advice actually is that if you want to have fun with these things, get some and just do what I'm doing right here. Just, kind of play around a little bit. Don't, necessarily have to look like anything your first time out. Do some experiments in your sketchbook. Give you an idea of different techniques that you might be able to use for the kind of work that you'd like to do that would be maybe a little more ambitious. There we go. So I got some nice clouds there. And if I want to put in something in the background there, again, I can really kind of thin that out a little bit and get a little bit of a hill there. Let it fade out. Put a little more water, get that move that pigment around. So you can create your own little landscapes, your own little environments, little things that exist in your head. Or you can be very realistic with it, entirely up to you. Decide how you want to play with these. Yeah, it might be nice, like down here. Let's just kind of make it look like there might be some more, maybe daffodils or something, a whole bunch of them in the back there. So you can get your gardening done without ever having to go outside. Okay, so, we kind of did our tulip. It's drying nicely. It's almost ready for the next application to it. I can kind of finish it off then, and a really satisfying thing is once you kind of get it pretty well to where you want it, when you peel that tape off and you have this real nice crisp edge, it just is like one little extra thing that makes all this so much fun. So, the other thing, this is a drawing that I did with the Pitt pens, the black ones. There's a set that you can get that has 8 different pen nibs, so you can do a lot of cross-hatching. I like doing a lot of line. And if nothing else, these markers are quite nice. If you develop something like this, then it's fun just to color it in. It's almost like you've made your own coloring book. Again, the India ink in the Pitt pens, the ones that have specific points, they have a very fine point all the way up to a black brush point. You can see how nicely that just fills it right in. And this is the type of thing that I really enjoy doing. You just kind of start with something. Came up with the idea of a bunch of animals having a tea party in the barn, and then started working on the background and drew this little imaginary farmland. That to move up and through there. Let's get the again this kind of notion of the clouds. Kind of put the concentration of the pigment up here. And take the water brush. I'll get a little bit of gray at the top. And I think that'll be probably enough. I hope that it's been informative. I hope it encourages you to work on your own things. I have enjoyed presenting this for you, and I believe it's being recorded, so this will be posted if you want to review any points. Okay, well, I've enjoyed being with everybody this evening. I hope, again, as I mentioned, you're inspired to do some work of your own and enjoy being in the studio. Thank you.